From the News Channel 5 Network, this is SportsLine.
Hey there, SportsLine on your television. Steve Laban here with you. Glad you are here with us on this Tuesday night on News Channel 5 Plus, and it is a big night if you are a Titans fan. Woke up to news this morning. Perhaps you were already at work, had the cup of coffee, you were getting set for a normal morning, and then you find out that the Titans traded Dorial Green-Beckham, the second-round pick of the team last year, number 40 overall in the NFL draft, gone before he even takes the first snap of his sophomore season in the National Football League. It was a surprise around the NFL today, but maybe not a big surprise if you spent a lot of time watching this team. There have obviously been some ups and downs with DGB, frankly, right from the day he got drafted. He hurt his hamstring early on. He was inconsistent in the offseason program a year ago. He reported to training camp last year out of shape. He had the hamstring injury that struggled to get back from. He wasn't really a factor in the preseason last year, and that slowed his growth going into the regular season. Now, he's got the size and the skills that you want to believe that he can be a potential star in this league, and he certainly showed some flashes last year. He was third on the team at the receiver position in catches with 32, 594 yards, couple 100-yard games towards the end of the season, and 4 touchdowns. But he never really shook the inconsistency. After the first 100-yard game, he was a non-factor the next week. In practice, he didn't always do the right things. He struggled to run routes the correct way. And he oftentimes dropped footballs that were thrown in his direction on catchable balls. This offseason, when Mike Mularkey got the head coaching job permanently and John Robinson took over, they made it very clear what they want for Titans players is they want guys who will work hard, are coachable, and consistent in their approach and production. That is something that you can say has been a real struggle for Dorial Green-Beckham. And they challenged him this offseason to work harder than he's ever worked before, to get in better shape than he's ever been before, and to come back and be the guy that they believe that he could be. He did work hard. He did come back in as good of shape as he's ever been. Mike Mularkey actually praised him on day one of training camp, saying he looks to be in great shape. He looks like he has a different level burst than what I have seen from him before. But just 3 days later, he drew the ire of the coaching staff in a practice in which he repeatedly ran the wrong routes. He dropped a couple of balls that could have been big plays. And that's just kind of what we've seen. Last Monday night in the scrimmage over at Nissan Stadium. Afterwards, Mike Mularkey talked for about a minute about the fact that he needs to take extra dedication to what he does, that he needs to put in the extra effort to be a better receiver and to give us more at that position. He played Saturday night and actually played okay at times. But at the end of the day, the Titans were willing to move on from a guy who was once such a promising talent, so much so that they drafted him number 40 overall. Now, there are a couple of important things to point out here. Old regime drafted him. Rustin Webster was the general manager who pulled the trigger on that, and he's no longer here. That's John Robinson. And Ken Wisenhunt was the guy in the building who put the biggest charge in the draft room to go after DGB at that spot. He's obviously no longer here as well. So his biggest advocates in the building, the guys who had the most skin on the line for taking him in the second round last year, are no longer in the building. And that's another reason why you could see why this would happen. The other factor that you have to look at here is the offensive line. I've heard several people say today, trading a second-round pick a year after you draft him for a guy who at this point of his career is a backup offensive lineman, a swing offensive lineman, seems like you're not getting a very good deal there. I understand that point of view, but some things you have to consider here. The Titans are trying to revamp this offensive line as much as humanly possible. They're trying to build depth there. And something they have lost this summer is some quality guys that give you that depth. Byron Bell is the first piece of that puzzle when he went down early on in OTAs and was lost for the entire season. He's out. he's probably your starting left guard this year. That would give you another swing guy in a Quinton Spain or whoever it ends up being, who's now going to be in the starting lineup at that position in all likelihood. Then, over the weekend, they lost Josue Matias, a guy who not a lot of people around here have heard of, but he was a real candidate to be a swing offensive lineman on this team and to make the roster, especially to give them help at the two tackle positions. You feel great about Taylor Lewan and Jack Conklin, but if one of those guys goes down, what do you do right now if you're the Titans? Who's the next guy to step up? There's not a real clear answer there. And when Josue Matias went down, that knocked another guy off of the list of potential answers. And so part of this, as much as it is about DGB and perhaps an indictment of his progress or lack of living up to the potential in 15 or 16 months as an NFL player, a big part of this is what's best for this team right now. And when you look at it right now, Green Beckham was maybe the 5th wide receiver on this team, probably the 6th wide receiver on this team, and there's no guarantee you're even going to be able to afford to keep 6 wide receivers in terms of roster spots when you get to the season. So if he's a fringe guy to make the team, can you get something back for him? Obviously, the Eagles see some value there, and they're able to give up a guy who gives you versatility on the offensive line, and that's what Dennis Kelly does. He can fill in at those tackle positions, and he can play several other positions as well. And the only position he hasn't played and hasn't started at in the NFL is center. And frankly, the Titans seem to be pretty set at center with Ben Jones and likely Brian Schwenke backing him up. But what you need is that swing guy who can play multiple positions, and you need specifically a guy who could fill in at one of the tackle spots in case of injury. That's what Dennis Kelly gives the Titans today. And so while you don't think it's a sexy trade, this isn't like waking up and finding out that the Titans traded to get DeMarco Murray or that they traded away the #1 pick or back up to get Jack Conklin. It's not as attractive as those trades. It's not eye-popping like that. But what it does do is build depth. And that is something that was a big focus of John Robinson when he took over the general manager role. And we've seen it. He's building it. There's more depth at wide receiver. He's trying to build the depth at the offensive line position. They got depth galore now all of a sudden at the running back spot. You've got depth on the defensive line and at linebacker and in the secondary. He's trying to bring in quality players to up the competition everywhere. And as he said, give us the most talented field of 90 guys to compete to make our roster and give us the best 53 available as we head into the season. And they continue to do that. Continue to do that over and over again. 737-7767 is the number. I want to hear from you tonight. What was your reaction to this trade? Because I've heard it very split on both sides. Some people say, good riddance. He didn't live up to what we wanted. If John Robinson believes this is a trade to make us better, he's done enough to earn my trust. This is a good trade. Other people have said, wait a second. This is a big guy with a huge skill set who's only had one season in the National Football League, and it wasn't a terrible one. Once he got past some of the work ethic issues and the injuries, 32 catches in his playing time last year isn't bad. So they're looking at the idea that, hey, there's a lot of potential here. Don't give up on him so soon, especially for what you got back. Where do you fall on that, on this trade today? 737-7767 is the number. Other questions thrown out there to wide receivers today is, do you guys feel like you were put on notice? They've been challenged a lot, but was this put on notice today because DGB got traded? And several guys said, I don't care what they say. John Robinson said, look, this wasn't to send a message. This was trying to make our football team better by bringing in a guy like Dennis Kelly to help us out on the offensive line. Several of the receivers said, I don't care what they say. You feel it. You feel a sense of urgency when you see a guy who was dressing in this locker this morning, and now all of a sudden he's gone on a plane to Philadelphia. That's the pressure that was placed on those wide receivers today. And Justin Hunter, to me, is a guy that should feel it as much as anybody. Because when you look at this roster right now, the guys who started over the weekend were Rashard Matthews, who was brought in from Miami as a free agent this offseason, and the rookie Tajay Sharp, who's exceeded all expectations up to this point. Those two guys started. I think you get into the regular season with a healthy Kendall Wright, and he's on the field. So those are probably your top three right now. I think Andre Johnson is impressed. He had a couple catches in the game, had a great practice last night when I was out there watching. I think he makes this roster. Harry Douglas is the backup slot guy at the moment. He can play all of the positions. He was one of the team's top offseason performers. He actually got the night off last night as part of his reward for winning the OSPI Offseason Performance Award out of the skill position player guys. So he's a guy that's hard to imagine after showing that leadership and that work ethic that he doesn't fit into the Titans' plans this season. So now all of a sudden that's 5 guys. That may be all you keep. It's a shot maybe you keep 6. But if you keep 6, there's several other guys fighting for that spot. Justin Hunter is certainly in that mix. But do they keep 6? And here's the other thing. Trey McBride, to me, and I've said this before, he's a dark horse to me for this team. A lot of people aren't talking about him. He was a 7th-round draft pick last year, the unheralded guy next to Dorial Green-Beckham. He didn't make the team out of camp. He was a midseason call-up from the practice squad. But here's what he does that none of those other guys in front of him at the receiver position do. He plays special teams. Trey McBride proved himself to be a valuable member of special teams last year because he became a gunner on the punt team and on the kickoff teams, a guy who's willing to go down and tackle people and cover. That is important. By all accounts, he did it well, and that's something that they value. This weekend, he returned to both kickoffs and punts. I think he's very likely to potentially win the kickoff job this year. That is a value that he has beyond being able to catch a pass in an emergency role that none of those other guys have. And that's the other thing you got to realize is, you know, if you keep 6, certainly, at least one of those guys is going to be inactive. And you got to start thinking about who can help you on special teams. Trey McBride, to me, is not just a candidate to be on the roster and make the position at wide receiver, but he's a candidate to be active because of everything he does on special teams. Probably the 5th guy who maybe makes it in terms of the depth chart in front of him at receiver, but that guy probably is the one who's inactive on Sunday, so McBride can play special teams. And then if you have an injury, you obviously resort things a little bit. But I think Trey McBride is a guy that not enough people are talking about when it comes to making this roster. And if he has a good chance to make the roster, what does that say for Justin Hunter? He certainly understands the pressure is on him now. All right, phone lines are open. 737-7767 is the number. We've got Jay on the line. We will get to him first right after the break. But several other phone lines are open if you would like to join in on the conversation. What do you think? Good trade or bad trade? DGB off to Philadelphia. Dennis Kelly in to help out on the offensive line. We'll get to that. We'll hear from Mike Mularkey. We'll hear from John Robinson about the trade. Much more Titans talk as we continue on here, just getting started on SportsLine on News Channel 5+.